G'day, welcome to Pay It Forward, and today I have a special edition, Christmas edition cuddle doll for you all. I know it's a Christmas miracle, I'm making a Christmas project, but I do read all of your comments and requests, and so many people have asked for a gingerbread man doll. And coming up for Christmas, they do happen to be one of my favourite characters, so I was happy to oblige. So this one is really simple, as a gingerbread man should be. Of course, you can make it up as a little ginger woman, gingerbread woman. I don't know what the correct terminology is. Either way, it will be super cute, super easy to make. You just need to download your free pattern. The link to that is in the drop-down description box below. Print out your pattern templates, follow the printing instructions that I give you, also in the description box, and make sure you always check your measuring bar put on every page of that pattern to make sure your pattern pieces are right. So let's get busy making the next in my full cuddle series, which is a beautiful gingerbread man. So let's have a look at what we're going to need to make our little gingerbread man cuddle doll. Now the cuddle doll series looks like this. This is my little hippo. So the body and the arms are made up exactly the same. Of course, in this case, we will not be adding a tail. So, and I will be adding a little stripy scarf at the end rather than a neck ruffle. They do need some kind of a neck detail. They look so much better with that. So this time I'm making up mine in felt. I don't normally do that because it's a gingerbread man. I love the idea of the felt. So I've got my interface. This is washable acrylic felt. These are my body front pieces. And you can see that I've already added some detailing to those. So the footage that I'm going to be inserting is me making the body, just a standard body. In this case, it will be for the elephant, but the bodies are all put together the same. But I just wanted to show you first that I've given you the templates for the little heart shapes, and that just adds a real gingerbread man look to it. So what I've done is I've fused those into place. They're cut from felt with fusible webbing, and I have appliqued on the machine the first layer on with the cream, the off-white, and then the red, and I've done a top stitch around that on the machine, and I have used top stitching thread for that. It gives it a more bold look. You can do it by hand. You could also sew those on with a blanket applique stitch, whatever you like. And it just really adds to that whole gingerbread man look. And you can do that in any colours, of course. I've added ric-rac to the legs, the lower legs, and I will be adding ric-rac to the arms, but on the arms we sew that on afterwards. I have given you lines on your pattern pieces to show you where to put that ric-rac, because we sew that on beforehand. And these pattern pieces are interfaced with fusible woven cotton interfacing. So do use the right interfacing, it makes all the difference. Cotton woven interfacing is way more flexible. So those are our two front body pieces. My back body pieces are a slightly darker tan. They look a lot darker on camera, but they're not much darker. So these are my back pieces. Now your back pieces have a back opening marked, and I've gone ahead and sewn a close zigzag stitch on those openings. It stops it stretching, and when we go to stuff the body, it stops any fraying and so on. Makes it much easier for when we close it up at the end. I've also added the ric-rac. They're ready to go. So those are our body pieces. And of course, you might have a different idea for doing your detailing. You might not want the heart on there. You can certainly add anything you like to these. I will be adding 2 purple buttons. I love traditional purple buttons on a gingerbread man. They will be going on his belly as we put the front pieces together. I will sew them into place for those little gumdrop buttons on his front. So that's the body. So then let's move on to the arms. So the arms we make by drawing onto our fabric that we've chosen for the arms No interfacing this time. We want them to be quite soft and flexible. Fold them together with right sides together and you trace your 2 arm pieces, and we're going to be stitching right on the line for those and cutting them out. It's the easiest way to do it. And I've got this beautiful wool fabric, because fabric still works best for the arms, even though the rest of the body is felt. If you do want to use felt, don't interface the felt for the arms, and then it will stay a lot softer. But this is obviously the perfect colour. It's got the lovely check. It'll all work in beautifully, and I'm just selecting the areas that don't have any red. So that's our arms all ready to go. And let's move on to, we also have foot pads for the body there. They are also felt with interfacing applied. Now let's have a look at the head. So the head is super easy, very sweet, as it should be, being a gingerbread person. So we've got our 2 head pieces. One of them is the front face, and you've got marks for the eyes. I've given you the exact eye placement, which will help you a lot. These are both interfaced felt. And then we have a head gusset that we put in, which will give us a flat head, but with a 3-dimensional look. So we want it to be a flattened sort of a face, but we still want it to have volume, and we want that lovely perfect circle. If you just sew 2 pieces together like this, when you go to stuff it, it will all bunch up and pucker up. So by putting a head gusset in there, you'll just have to trust me, it makes all the difference. So on that face, I'm going to be adding the little mouth. Now the felt mouth is cut from felt with fusible webbing applied. We're going to be ironing that straight on, and we are going to be stitching that very simply, just to stitch all around the outside. And then you've got your marks for the eyes, and in keeping with this being a child's toy, I'm using safety eyes, and I'm using 12mm. You could go down to a 10mm, but I think 12mm is perfect for this project, and they will sit right there. I'm not a fan of gingerbread people with noses, so I've no nose for mine, but you can also add a nose if you want. And if you want to substitute those safety eyes with buttons, you can, but remember, if it's for a very young child, they can chew the buttons off. Then I've got this little flock of hair at the top, which is the icing, and that will sit beautifully at the top. It just gives that extra bit of detail to bring in that real gingerbread look. We've got the fasteners for the backs of those eyes, and we do need a neck joint. So the neck joint is a 45mm neck joint, all ready to go. Have a look at my jointing videos if you want to know how I put mine together. It is the best and safest way for a child's toy to add a head or limbs, and it is very safe, very child safe. So as I said, you'll need your rick-rack and polyester filling for filling, extra strong thread in a matching extra strong thread. I'm using 100% polyester thread in my machine. I have my machine stitch length set to number 2, so it's nice and small, and we can get started. So I'm now going to insert the footage where I'm making the elephant's body, and it will look similar to this. As I said, they're all put together in exactly the same way. I'll see you back here with that all done, and we'll be ready to make the head. Now the body that we're about to make is the body that I use for all of the animal dolls in this series. So even though the colours may change throughout, all of the bodies are put together in the same way. It just saves me having to film that section all over again each time, and it will allow me to give you a whole lot more of a range in this little series. So just follow along regardless of the animal that you're making. This is how you put that body together. The first step in creating the body, we're going to take our 2 back body pieces, and where the opening marks are, we're going to sew a close zigzag stitch on the machine on the edge there, just to bind those edges. It stops it from fraying, and when we go to close that opening, it's going to be nice and neat and tidy, and it won't stretch. So our next step is to create a little tail. Now I've made a plait with my yarn, just a little braid, and left some ends free at the end there. I've just tied a knot in the end and stitched across here. So this is the end we're going to pop into the seam. Mine's about 13 centimeters overall. You can make it longer, shorter, whatever you like. So we're going to be sewing the centre back seams of both the front and the back body pieces. So these are our front body pieces that don't have any marks on them. So the centre front seam are these ones here. So where your mark is at the back, your opening, these are the centre back and centre front seams. So in the front pieces, we just put those right sides together, and we're just going to stitch with a 4mm seam allowance all the way down to the base there. And I do sew that 2 times because we're going to be adding stuffing. Do also make sure that the start and finish of all of your seams, that you back and forth with a couple of stitches to secure it. So when we go to do our centre back seam in exactly the same way, of course we're not going to sew that opening, we're just going to sew from the neck edge down and back and forth, and same here. But here is where our tail is going to go. So we're going to drop that in so that that's caught in between those layers in that seam as we go, and do make sure that you sew back and forth over that section so that it's held well, and make sure that it is all still lined up as you do that. So 4mm seam allowance. I have my jeans needle in my machine, and I do have my machine stitch length set to a number 2, so it's nice and small. You can now go ahead, once you've sewn both those seams, and press them open and flat. It gives you a much better finish in the end. So this is our front and our back. So at this stage, you can go ahead and put those right sides together again. And the seam we're going to sew next is that inner leg seam. It's just a very small little seam, and you want to make sure that you've lined up that centre point. So perhaps pop a clip in there or a pin, and we're just going to stitch with that same 4mm seam allowance from the base around. Make sure that you really make sure that that's really nice and secure. So that 2 times that same 4mm seam allowance. There you can see that centre inside leg seam stitched, and I've sewn it 2 times. It's nice and strong. And we don't clip that seam. In dressmaking, you would probably clip that seam, but because in soft sculpture, we keep our seams very, very small, and so that we don't have to clip them, because it would definitely compromise that seam. Once we add stuffing, we need it to stay together. So the next thing I've done, before we put this one completely together, I've added my buttons for the front. I've popped my first one about 5 to 6 centimeters from that top neck edge, because remember, we've got pull in around that joint, and you want to leave a little bit of room for a neck ruffle or perhaps a little scarf. So I've got those 2 there. So now we're going to put right sides together, and we're going to sew up those side seams, which of course they will match beautifully. Just popping my clips in there, right the way down the side to the bottom of that leg, and we will sew that 4mm seam allowance 2 times, just the same as before. So the final step in putting the body together is we're going to add the foot pads to the little base of the leg there. So we're going to put right sides together. It's just like pinning in just a teddy bear foot pad. You can start anywhere because it's a circle. So we're just going to take our pin, and we're going to go through all of those layers, flip it over and catch a little bit on the other side. Push that pin head all the way down. This is the easiest way to pin in a foot pad. Start to follow that curve. Pin through both of those layers, flip it over, and just take a little bit up on the underside. Pushing the pin head down just clamps it all into place. Just going to make my way all the way around. It'll fit in beautifully if you've kept to your 4mm seam allowances. There we go, all pinned into place. My next step will be to take my needle with an extra strong thread on it, and I'm just going to overcast that foot pad into place so that I can remove all of my pins. So I've now removed all of those pins, and you see that little foot pad is tacked into place. I now take some extra strong thread, a single strand with a knot in the end, and we're going to sew that foot pad into place using a stab back stitch. I'm going to put the link at the top of the screen there for you to my video that shows you how to sew this stitch, but I will show you a couple of stitches here. So I'm coming in from the underneath with my needle, and the first thing I'm going to do is just make 2 stitches, one right on top of the other, just so my start point is nice and secure, and nice small stitches. And so now you see how I'm holding that out flat. I'm coming up from behind and just traveling along the length of one stitch and going back into my last exit hole. So again, I'm going to come up from the underneath, traveling along a little way and back into the exit hole. Because it's extra strong thread, we're sewing it back and front. It's the strongest stitch of all for hand sewing in soft sculpture. So each time you just have to make sure you go back into that exit hole so that the stitch is fully linked. And you should be able to create a line that's just as accurate as you would on the machine. So you can see I'm just going to make my way right the way around that foot pad, and then I will just repeat with the other side. You can go ahead and turn that one through once you've sewn those foot pads in, and do take your time to roll out all of those seams, particularly around those feet, so we've got a lovely rounded finish. And that's our body. That's the way we put the body together on all of the animals in this series. Regardless of the tail that you pop in there, they're all put together in the same way. So now we're going to move ahead and make the arms. So the arms in this case, that's one that I've already made, and I'm making it in the colour that I'm using for the head. So we've looked like we've got a nice naked little arm, and this is the romper. So very simple to do, just pop that one aside and bring this one in. So I've got my piece of fabric folded right sides together. I've pressed it nice and flat, and I've traced around my template, arm template, and I'm going to stitch exactly on that line all the way around, and I do reinforce the lower edge by sewing that section again. Leave that top edge open, make sure you're back and forth on your start and finish, and then we'll come back to cut that one out. So now that is all stitched, I just need to cut that one out, so straight across the top there, and then I'm going to cut approximately just a 4mm seam allowance right the way around the edge. And again, we don't notch or trim this seam, we don't clip the curves because we're giving it a very small seam. We're going to be stuffing this, and we don't want to pop that seam open. So before I turn this one through, because I used a heat erasable pen, I can now take that to my iron and press that, and it will remove those marks, and then I'm going to turn that through. I've gone ahead and turned that arm through, and now we're going to add our filling. Now, just like I have with this one, we pack the end of the arm really firm up to about the wrist and then soften off. You can see not much there, and then nothing for about the top 1.5 inches, because when we add it, we want the arm to sit nice and soft at the sides. If we fill it right up to the end, it'll stick out. So just go ahead and tuck that filling in that top edge there. in that opening. Easiest with forceps. Take that right down to the base there. Support the end there, but do pack that hand and wrist very firm. Continue up nice and firm and then soften it off and then nothing up until here. Once you get up to there, just bring those two edges together and just stay stitch on the machine across the top to hold that all together. Next, we need to go ahead and add those arms to our body at the top of the neck on each side. So you need to first of all make sure that your little hand is curving towards the front. And we're going to take this straight edge here and we're going to line it up with our center seam, our side seam here, and make sure that it is just exactly halfway. So here's my side seam and we're just going to tack it to the top. I'm just using my extra strong thread just to hold that into place. Line it up with the top exactly. And it must be right on that seam and centered so that the little arms hang correctly at the side. So these tops of these arms will be pulled in when we put the neck bolt, when we put the head on, and the arms will come out from that neck shoulder section. So it's a great way to add these simple little arms. So I just got that exactly in place. Make sure it's very secure, because the top edge here won't be seen, it'll be drawn in around that bolt. There we go. So as we pull that in around the bolt, that little arm will be caught up in that neck section. So I'm going to do the same. Make sure you line it up on the other side seam exactly in half and stitch the other one into place. My next step is that we sew a doubled strand of extra strong thread, a running stitch just 4 millimeters in from the edge, starting at the back. Leave your tail ends hanging and sew right around that top neck edge, including those arms. So now I've tied my first knot and I'm just going to pull on those thread ends and pull that in. So we want to leave just enough room for that bolt to pass through. So just a small opening there. Our disc is 45 millimeters, so it's going to cover all of that, and then knot that off at least 4 times. So here I am back and I have my little gingerbread man body made just the way you've seen the elephant body made up. So you can see I've got my little gumdrop buttons in place. That rickrack has come up beautifully around those ankles. I will be just hand stitching the same around the arms there. I'll just do that with a little tacking stitch at the end. But for now, we're going to move ahead and we're going to start working on the head. So we have our front head piece that has our marks in place. First thing we're going to do is press the mouth into place. Now I've given you a mark, and the mark is where the very bottom of that mouth sits. So that's where it starts. The eyes here. The placement of the eyes and the mouth on a gingerbread man is really crucial to getting that little expression really lovely. Their features are quite condensed and you don't want him looking too wide-eyed. You'll have to trust that I've put all of those. It makes it really easy. We can do that because it is a flat piece that we're working on. So same with the hair. You've got marks on your pattern piece. that you can line up. There's a mark there at the top of the head that will line up beautifully, and you can take this, make sure this is all perfectly lined up, press those two on using a hot iron and a protective cloth. Once you've done that, I'm then going to go ahead and on the hair section, I'm going to sew that same close zigzag on my machine just in the off-white, the same colour, that lower edge. This section's going to be caught up in the seam, so just this lower edge, I stitch that into place. I like to use that machine stitch for this one because it really makes it super neat and professional. You could hand stitch it with a blanket applique, but I actually like the machine stitch better. And with the mouth, I simply sew right in the middle a straight stitch all the way around that mouth and link it up beautifully in a matching red thread. So that has the facial features stitched into place. You can see what a lovely neat finish that is. So now my next step is to add the eyes. So you can go ahead and make the holes for the eyes. Now don't just trust my spots. Make sure that you measure them and make sure that they are correct, and also make that hole big enough for that to pass through. If you're using a shank like I am with my safety eye, I'll pop that through and add that little clasp on the back. Just a tip with the safety eyes. If you find that these are really hard to get on, just drop them both in just a small bowl of very, very, very hot water for a little while to soften up before you actually add them. That does help them flex a little bit more. And also you can use the end of a cotton reel to actually clamp them down, something that's got a hole the right size. Otherwise you'll be sewing buttons on there, or alternatively you might be using glass eyes. I don't know why you would on a doll like this, and I think that the safety eyes definitely work the best. So I'm going to get those popped into place and then we'll start adding that head gusset. There we go, so that has those eyes nicely clamped into place. Very sweet and simple expression, which is what we're looking for. So now we are going to take the two head gusset pieces. We're going to put them right sides together at either end, it's all the same. And we're just going to sew that 4mm seam allowance straight across here, just sew one row on top of each other, 2 lines of stitching, and then we are going to press that seam open and flat. So now we have that seam pressed open and flat, that centrepiece is joined. We are going to put right sides together. We're going to take the front of the head and we're going to line up the centre seam with that centre mark on the head that we've got there. I'm going to put a clip straight on there to hold that in place, and then I'm going to take the edges and meet them up, taking my pin, take my pin through all of the layers, flip it over and just take up a little bit of fabric on the other side. It's the easiest way to pin a 3D curve. So my pin through all of the layers, flip it over and take up just a little bit of fabric on the other side. Push the pin head all the way down, that clamps it into place. Making my way all the way down. You'll find this piece will fit perfectly right down to the neck edge. You'll have to go around that little curve. And then I'm going to do the same from this side all the way down, get that all pinned into place, and then I'm going to overcast it into place with my extra strong thread so that I can remove all of my pins. So you can see that I have stitched that entire head gusset piece into place, removed all of my pins. Now I can take this to the machine and I can sew that on the machine, and I will sew that seam 2 times like all of the others. It's a 4mm seam allowance. But what you have to remember is this circle is one of the most important features on this doll. So take your time to keep that beautiful circle so that when you do turn it through, there's not any bumps or changes to that lovely fluid line. So really, if you think I'll just put it together and I'll just stitch it into place without any pinning or tacking, it's really not worth it. There's no way you'll ever get that beautiful circle shape. So it's worth the extra time to do it. So go ahead and get that one stitched into place and then repeat with the other head piece. So I'm going to do exactly the same thing. I'm going to put the back of the head on. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to tack it into place first and then stitch that one into place. I have now gone ahead, once that's all sewn up, and you can see I've really rolled out those seams. You want to really make sure that you've got that beautiful round head. Now, that's just the cutest face ever. So now I've done that back and front and we're ready to fill this head. Now, there's a really specific way you want to do this filling. So let me take some polyester filling. And the trick is that we want to fill it super firm, but we want to keep it that flattened shape. If you just take this head and you randomly add stuffing, you're going to end up with a really odd shape. You're going to end up with a weird looking ball shape. What we want to do is keep it flat on the table. You want to keep your hand over the top of it. Whatever you're using for your stuffing tool, just focus on filling out the entire outside edge first. So first up, you're really concentrating on that circle shape. Keeping my hand on it the whole time so that it can't come up like this. And I make my way around the entire outside of the head, watching that circle shape, making sure that I'm pushing out those seams beautifully. And you'll be surprised how much control you have over the whole shape of the head just by doing it this way. So you can see it's starting to fill out, but in the best possible way. And you follow that all the way down to the neckline. And the centre of the head pretty much looks after itself because of the way that we're filling it. And if we start adding filling straight into the centre, that's all that's going to happen. It's going to lift up in the middle and we don't want that. So you'll find it really super easy to do. Pushing that in nice and flat and packing it all in. And you'll keep the shape. You'll have it's like a nice big thick cookie or scone. See that shape there? So just continue on until you've got this filled till just a little way from the edge as we normally would. Then I will take my wool felting needle and start really packing that filling in because we want a nice firm packed neck there to add our joint. So let me show you how that head should look. Now, beautifully rounded out, back and front, and really solid. I'm really pushing there. There's no give in that at all, but we've kept that beautiful, nice flattened shape. So I've gone ahead and packed out the neck section nice and full as well. No give in that. And I've taken my wool felting needle, which is a big help in packing that stuffing in. And now I've got a double strand of extra strong thread. I've started at the back of the neck and I've just sewn a running stitch all the way around, about 5 millimeters in from the neck edge, and left my tail ends hanging because I want to tie this off. So I've left my needle on. I'm going to take my assembled neck joint
And I'm going to slip that in. It's nice and snug. It needs to be nice and snug. Push that right down. That also helps you compress all of that filling. I'm going to tie my first knot. I'm keeping my needle on because I want to go around it the second time. I like it to be really, really strong. So pushing down on that and pulling that in. I'll do that off camera so that I can really get that. I usually hold this between my knees and really pull that in. And then keep the tension up, knot that off at least 4 times. I like to, as I said, go around the second time with my needle and tie it off again before snipping my thread ends. So you can see that nicely pulled in and tied off. Get it in nice and tight around that bolt. So now we're ready to add that head to the body, put this one together. So you've already got that opening made in the top of the body. All we need to do is pop that one through, come in from the underneath. You want to keep all this area here flattened out. So we're going to go in there, add the other disc to our joint. That in. Make sure you don't have anything caught up. Then I'm going to add my washer and that nut. Just going to finger tighten it for now. I've got my super glue ready. But what I want to do is make sure that I've pulled everything out. Everything's nice and neat and tidy. Like I said, everything's sitting flat. Make sure those arms aren't caught up. Everything's pulled out nice and flat. And then I can go ahead, tighten that up with my spanner or whatever tool you're using. And once I have it as tight as I want it, do make sure it is nice and tight. Tighten it until you can just move that neck joint because it will slacken off a little in time. And you want it to be a little bit poseable. I'll add 1 drop of super glue in there on the threads of that bolt so that little nut is never going to come off. So that has our cute little man all put together, and now all we need to do is fill that body. So that's just as simple as taking our polyester filling, and we're going to start, of course, with those feet. So I'm going to be taking that filling right down and packing out those little round foot pads very, very firm, just like the head here. Also pay particular attention to the crotch area here. Make sure that you're filling everything out. And the other thing I want you to remember with this one in particular is that remember what we did with the head where we kept it all more of a flattened shape. That's what we want to do with the body, remembering that we've got some nice curves there, but we don't want to be filling and filling and filling the body this way, so it's very round. We want it to be more of that flattened shape in keeping with that gingerbread man shape. Get that all packed out nice and firm, and up here to support that neck and head. Again, use your wool felting needle to pack it in. Bring it right up to the edge here and tidy that up with your wool felting needle, then we'll come back and close that opening. So there we go, that has my little gingerbread man all filled out. Again, you can see super firm, just like the head. So with nice floppy arms. And now I've gone ahead, taken my wool felting needle, tucked in all of that filling, and we're going to just sew up that back opening. So I have a long strand of extra strong thread with a whole pile of knots at the end. I do have a video that shows you how to sew the closing ladder stitch, and that's there in my video list. You can have a look at that. I'm going to show you here. So I'm taking my needle in on the underside, right where that opening starts, at the 4mm seam allowance, and pulling that through, and that knot will hold that. Then I'm going to travel straight across, and I'm going to dive in the other side and travel down the length of 1 stitch. Keep your stitches nice and small. Pull that one across. So that's 1 stitch going straight across. Pull that in. I'm going to turn him around this way. And then I'm going to travel back across to where I started, literally where I started. I'm going to go in that first entry hole. And I'm going to travel down, the same as I did on the other side, 1 stitch. I'm going to give that seam a squeeze and pull on those threads. So you can already see that's pulling that seam in. Then I'm going to go back over the other side and I'm going to dive in to the last exit hole from the previous stitch. Travel down the length of 1 stitch, and each time I'm giving that seam a squeeze and pulling on that thread. Back again to this side, making sure I'm going into that same hole, and then travelling down again 1 stitch, keeping that nice and even, squeezing that in and pulling that in every single time. You don't want to get halfway down with your stitches and then think you'll pull on that thread, because it won't all knit together well. It's very important that you keep your stitches even, otherwise you'll be taking up more on one side than the other, and when you get down to the bottom here you'll have puckering on one side. So keep them nice and even, keep squeezing that in, and you can see you'll get quite an invisible closing. So just keep going till you've got that opening closed and then knock that off. So here's my gorgeous gingerbread man. Now I have gone ahead and just stitched some rickrack just by hand round those arms, and so that's finished him off beautifully. You can see I've added just a little knit scarf in the red and white. Of course you can embellish him any way you like. Remember what I said about putting something around their neck though? They look so much better with something around their neck. But that could be anything, any kind of Christmas decorations. You could have little bells, holly. Just remember, if you're making them for a very small child, bear in mind the choking hazard with little bits and pieces. But I think if you are adding a scarf or something, keep it in a knit fabric, because then it's all lovely and soft and in keeping with the whole project. I think just the perfect Christmas stuffy, fantastic for gift giving, and if any of you are doing markets leading up to Christmas, this one will be a fantastic bestseller. You can make it up in fabric, of course. I do just like the idea of the felt. It gives it that lovely textured gingerbread look. So I hope you've enjoyed seeing him come together, and I'm looking forward to seeing little gingerbread men and little gingerbread girls. So hopefully I'll see some on our Facebook page. Thank you so much for joining me. Well, I hope I've made some of you happy with this project. I know that a lot of you will be crazy making these ready for Christmas. They really are the best Christmas plushie gift, and as I said, definitely make them up for markets. If any of you are selling online, go right ahead. You're most welcome to sell any product you make from my patterns. You just can't sell the pattern itself. So I wish you all very well with that. It's a great way for me to pay it forward to you all. So have a fantastic creative week this week, everybody, and experiment with colour. I'd love to see a little girl with a little tutu with rickrack on. Somebody do that for me, please, and share it on our Pay It Forward page. If you haven't joined our page, come and join us. You'll see all of the makes that everybody makes from Pay It Forward and Masterclass with my patterns on there, and you can share your own. We want to see your work. Thank you all for your continued support. I hope you enjoy this one, and I look forward to seeing your beautiful creations. So until next time, keep on being creative. Remember to pay all those good things forward, and for now, it's hooroo from me.